Alright, this is our second video on finding the greatest common factor. This one is focusing more on finding the GCF between two monomials versus just two numbers. So, if you have no idea what the greatest common factor is, you definitely should watch the first video before watching this one. Alright, so finding the GCF between two monomials, we're going to kind of break this down and look at one thing at a time. So, first we look at the numbers. You have a 3 and you have a 9. And we're going to try to, in our heads, think about what is the biggest number that fits into both a 3 and a 9. What common factor do they have, and what's the biggest one that they have in common? In this case, well, 3 doesn't really have a lot of common factors to consider. It's just 3 and 1. So 3 is a factor of 3, but 3 also fits into 9. So 3 is a common factor between 3 and 9. Alright, so next I'm going to kind of break this down. Not that I'm looking for all this work from you guys, but I just want to show you what's happening. X to the 4th power is multiplying 4 of those x's together. So now I'm just going to look at the x's. On the right, I have just one x. So how many x's do they have in common? Well, they both have 1, and that's about it. On the right, we don't have any other x's in common with all the ones that are on the left. So they have one x in common, so I'm going to go ahead and put that x with our 3. And now I'm going to look at the y's. On the left we have y times y times y. On the right we have just two of them, y times y. So how many y's do they have in common? Well, they have this one in common, and they have this one in common. So they have a y times a y, which is the same thing as y squared. So our GCF, we went just one piece at a time. We looked at the numbers, the coefficients up front, the x's, and then the y's, and we got 3xy squared. Now again, I was just kind of showing you some of this I know that we're doing in our heads, and I hope you are, because that makes it go a little bit faster. But if you can't figure it out, you always can write it out like that and just circle the ones that are in common. Alright, so these next two monomials, looking at 10 and 15, what's the biggest number that fits into both 10 and 15? Hopefully you guys are coming up with a 5. 5 is a common factor for both, and that will be the biggest one. Now we're going to go ahead and look at our m's. This is m to the 5th, which means there are 5 m's, and this is m squared. So how many m's do they have in common? Well, I want to pay attention to the smaller exponent, because on the right, all we have are 2 m's. We don't have any more m's than that. So on the left, even though we have 5 m's multiplied together, we only have 2 in common with both monomials. So they have m squared in common. And now we look at the n's. Here's an n squared and here's an n squared. So guess what? That's what they have in common. They have an n squared in common. So that's kind of how you might do that in your head a little bit more. But if it's easier this way up here, this is definitely more visual. So if you're kind of a visual person and you want to just write it out without the exponents and circle what they have in common, this is a great way to get your GCF as well.